Welcome to Disturbing the Peace. I'm your host, John Amanchukwu, coming to you live from YRefi Studios. America's moral crisis didn't start in Washington, and another election won't fix what the church refuses to confront. Today, Troy Miller, President and CEO of National Religious Broadcasters, joins me to discuss the responsibility of Christians to engage a culture increasingly hostile to biblical truth. We're confronting the rise of CEO pastors, why Christians are turning to AI for spiritual guidance, and whether the church is prepared to fight an information war for the hearts and minds of the next generation. All here today on Disturbing the Peace.
Protector on a mission from heaven. There's too much at stake to be quiet. Let's disturb the peace. Me and you. Let's disturb the peace. With John Amanchukwu. Disturb the peace. I'm a protector on a mission from heaven. There's too much at stake to be quiet. Let's disturb the peace. Me and you. Disturb the peace. With John Amanchukwu. Disturb the peace.
And now on Disturbing the Peace, I want to bring on my special guest, Troy Miller, President and CEO of National Religious Broadcasters, the nation's largest association of Christian communicators. Troy, welcome back to Disturbing the Peace.
Thanks for having me back. It's great to be with you.
Likewise, it's an honor to have you on the show. Let's start here. For viewers who may not know NRB, what is the organization and what drew you personally to leading it?
So NRB is one of the oldest and largest organizations that advocates on behalf of Christian communicators so that the gospel message can stay in the public sector and stay in the media today. And that's at the core of what NRB does. And look, that's what drew me to NRB. This organization has a long history of defending not only the First Amendment rights, but just the rights in general, again, of Christian communicators, whether it's legislative, regulatory, or in the judiciary. We're out there battling so that folks like you and other commentators and even pastors in the pulpit, that they have the right to have their message in the public sector.
Since your time being at NRB, how have you strengthened the voices of communicators out there and giving them backing and support and making sure that they can keep the main thing, so to speak?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we work on a lot, keeping the main thing. Here, I'm always reminded, in Acts 6, when we often look at it as when the deacons were created. If you remember what the apostles said, it's not right that we should be waiting on tables. We should be doing the administrative functions. We should be focused on prayer and preaching. So we work hard. We worked this the last several years, and since I've been here, we've really increased our work with Federal Communications Commission. We worked hand in hand with them to do a lot of what we call deregulation, to roll back some of the administrative burdens that Christian communicators have to deal with, some of the public filings. And I think we've really seen that. We were talking about this the other day. We've probably seen at least a 30% decrease in the amount of administrative tasks that folks have to do on the back end. I just got off of a call. We work on things like the music licensing royalties. I know these aren't the really kind of, wow, those are neat things. They're the background stuff there. But we're also out there heavily working on just access. We are one of the chief forces behind the AM in every vehicle bill, working hard to make sure that Christian audience has access, free access to over-the-air broadcasting on radio. 80 million people still listen to that. So these are just some of the things things. We have we had 2 active cases that we've won already against the Federal Communication Commission. One had to do with employment. Another one had to do with how our ministries and those folks have to do reporting on overseas entities. We're actively engaged in a case with the IRS on what's called the Johnson Amendment, those sort of things. And then we kind of examine every piece of legislation that comes out of the Congress today to make sure there's nothing hidden in there that are going to affect our folks. And then the other thing we do, our big annual convention, we run the largest annual convention of Christian communicators, where we really do what we help to sharpen and equip communicators with the latest changes in technology, latest changes in things. Last year we had a stage, 2 different stages, all talking about artificial intelligence. Wow. And how it works in production, how it's going to work. And so we're working hand in hand. Those are all some of the things that we work on a daily basis.
What's the overall morale of Christian communicators today? Are they feeling like they're out there alone doing this by themselves? Or are they seeing that organizations like NRB, which is the tip of the spear, that they have a backing, they have an own company to come to, so to speak, after they've fought many battles in the kingdom?
Well, I'm going to go with the latter there. I think they really understand the importance of NRB. And let me tell you, just to give you an example of that, when I came on NRB in 2019 as the interim president, we had a convention out in Anaheim, California. We had about 2,300 in attendance. Wow. This NRB this year for NRB 2026 was held here in Nashville, Tennessee. We had 5,800 in attendance this year, and we're going to be in Washington, D.C. next year. We think that number is going to be over 6,000 in attendance. And a lot of that is because we do have their back, and they're also coming because we're helping them move forward and move into the, where technology is going. We did some things in the last couple of years as well. In 2025, we did a survey with the Barna group. They're one of the best kind of survey polling organizations out there. And we call it the State of Christian Media. And here's some things I think you'll find encouraging and your audience should find encouraging. 66% of Americans, almost 2/3, tune into Christian media at some point out there. So, there's a big portion that are out there of Christian media, Christians who tune in, a regular Christian media. That means they tune in more than 3 or 4 times a week. They're tuning in at almost 80% out there. So Christian media is active and involved. And here's 2 numbers I think you're really going to like. The 2 largest demographics that are tuning into Christian media, and that could be over the air, traditional, or digital, streaming today, were the Gen Zers at 63%. And behind them were millennials at 58%. Baby boomers and X-Genders came below that. And so there's a real hunger out there for this. And here's another one. Christian media, when we asked them, the audience out there, and this was general audience, this is not just Christian evangelicals, this is general U.S. audience, Christian media came in at 64% of people said that Christian media was both trustworthy and valuable. And that mainstream media right now, they're in the low 20s as being trustworthy and valuable. So I think that really shows the work that Christian media is doing out there, all the hard work, but also the integrity behind our communicators. And that integrity has really shown in the way that the audience views them.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, Troy, but what are some platforms that people can go to best ascertain this Christian media? What do you recommend? What avenues, what platforms?
For just general Christian media?
Yes.
Oh, look, there's a number of them out there. There's some great folks. A lot of people, of course, if you're digital wise, you're consuming probably podcast. And here's another thing. We've helped a lot of Christians make sure they're on all the podcast networks that are out there. Salem Media has a great podcast network. American Family Radio is out there. They have some great podcasting networks, Bot Radio, just a number of them. You can go to NRB nrb.org, and we can help guide you there. But that's the really, I think, neat thing is that Christian media isn't just in a vacuum. It's not in a box, and it's not just contained to, as we might say, preaching at the choir. It's available in the general public market, and it's easy to find. You can list who your local Christian radio and television broadcasters are, as well as, who might be the key influencers on certain podcasts or streaming.
America just celebrated its 250th birthday. And I believe that you were a part of some event that took place around that as well. Do you believe we are at a genuine moral and spiritual turning point where the country has to decide what kind of civilization it wants to be?
I think that is the question of the day that's out there for us, that's in front of us, especially as Christians. As you said, we have been working with the administration for well over a year on this. But, to celebrate our 250th anniversary, we had a major event at the NRB convention this year. We've been involved in several events that have gone on in the National Mall. But going back to, just understanding the roots and the foundations of our country and how this country was really founded on the fact that it was Christianity, it was the Bible, it was the Judeo-Christian ethics and morality that our founding fathers leaned on. We did a piece earlier this year just on biblical literacy. It's something that's really suffering. But if you went back to the Revolution times, the average American would be a Bible scholar today because of how much they were in the Word, but not just how much they were in, but how much that affected the way they lived their lives. They looked at the world through this lens of, we call it the Christian worldview, and then they acted upon it. And I think they really were concerned, and this is something I've talked about recently, that generation, along with generations up until about 50 years ago, were very concerned with the future generations. One of the things of the American spirit was that especially with people that came in that second wave of immigrants, was they really wanted a better future, not only for themselves, but more for their children and their grandchildren. That was a big part of what we call the American dream, was the future. And we've lost some of that, John, I think today, that's really key to why your question is out there. What future are we handing off to our kids? And we have a real worldview value battle today about what that future is going to look like.
The Bible tells us in Proverbs 22, verse 6, it says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart. Now, there's no guarantee that if you train up a child in the right way, they're not going to depart for a season, and they're not going to walk away from God for a season or stray from the church, whatever it might be. However, it's a guiding principle that if you put the right stuff in them in the younger years and adolescence, training them up in the home, I believe that we should have the Christian church, the Christian home, and the Christian school. I'm a strong proponent for that. That's a 3-tiered system for success. But we don't see that all the time. When you look at the public school system today, the average student spends from grades K through 12, 105,000 hours in a public school. That's a lot of pedagogy. That's a lot of training and teaching. But, Christian education allows you to have a greenhouse effect where you can control the climate of what's going on day to day, the curriculum, the books, what's in the library. You can control that. I've seen myself in my travels around the country. I've now traveled to 23 states, fighting against many of the woke doctrines that has permeated education, fighting against gender theory, queer theory, and critical race theory. And I've been able to amass over 300 million views doing it and expose for everyday parents to see the heinous things that are being taught in the public school system. We've been able to strike down transgender policies and remove dozens of pornographic books. And we've strengthened the backs of Papa Bears, who oftentimes are not present, at school board meetings. You have the Mama Bears who are there all of the time, working on the curriculum and doing the projects with the kids and teaching them and training them in the home and education. But we've been able to really galvanize support from Papa Bears, men speaking up and standing up and defending the family. You've argued that America's moral crisis didn't begin in Washington. You've talked about that, which is good, and I think that's fair, and I appreciate you for saying that. Have Christians sometimes made the mistake of blaming politicians for problems that actually began in our churches, homes, schools, and communities?
Yeah, absolutely. We have done that. Here's the irony of that. We'll oftentimes blame, as you said, cultural issues on, politicians or lawmakers or influencers, people in the media. And we don't sort of step back and look at that. But at the same time, then we'll say to Christians, we shouldn't be involved in those things. We shouldn't be involved in politics and that. And you're like, hold on a second. There's a connection here, but it really does get back to the source of our responsibility. And I'll go back to the founding fathers again. One of the original principles that was behind this nation, one of the reasons the first pilgrims even came over to here, was the idea of the individual conscience, that we were responsible individually for our own conscience and then the actions thereof. And so those early pilgrims, they wanted to make sure that they were able to pass on their values, their faith, their learning to their children, to that generation, without the state interfering with that, or at the time the monarchies or the governments interfering in that. And that was a guiding principle for this country that really, I think, caused this country to be the great country it is today, was that at the core of the country was the strength of the family and the strength of the moral direction of the country, which came from the pulpits of this country. And that was really what America rode that foundation on. When we sort of lost sight of that, when we kind of perverted the American dream to be more about financial success, we moved into this kind of consumerism mentality in the country, and this outsource. And we started to outsource. We outsourced charity. That's one of the first things the government came into. And then we, as you said, we outsourced education. And then we said we outsourced morality, thinking that the lawmakers of the country were the ones setting the moral direction here. And it's something we need to step up, back up to the plate and take back in charge of. That needs to be the pulpits of our country, the Christian communicators of our country. And by the way, people are hungry to hear from us about this, but it really starts in the family, and it does start with fathers.
This is Disturbing the Peace, and I'm talking to Troy Miller, President and CEO of NRB. I'll be right back after this break. Private student loan debt in the U.S. totals about $300 billion. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed, while refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. While refi can save you thousands of dollars by refinancing and even lower your total cost. Just call 888-YREFI-85 or log on to YREFI.com. That's YREFY.com. So, Troy, I want to ask you this question here. What do you believe is the most important thing that Christian pastors should be focusing on in this moment? Is it, civic engagement? Is it focusing on our biblical responsibility? Or should we be talking more about the political issues that we see today in our country?
Let me say I can wrap all of those up into one thing. I think pastors should be focused on. And one thing I think we have gotten out of balance in our churches and that's, I'm going to sum all that up into discipleship. I really think that one of the things that's happened in the church, and there's been a couple of movements that started back in the 1990s into early 2000s. There was kind of what I call a sort of program-driven movement and a seeker-driven movement that were, you know, more evangelistic in nature, like that's our number one thing. But the Great Commission tells us to go into all the nations and preach the gospel and make disciples. And disciples are people who actually understand what the faith is that they believe, and then they live that out in their lives. They live it out. And I think one of the things that pastors really focused more on helping their congregations understand what the biblical worldview is. What are the principles that guide us as Christians? What are the important things that should reflect in our lives? Why is the family important? The family is the first institute that God put into place back in the garden. Why is life so important? Because we're created in the image of God. All of these issues, all of these, the Bible may not tell us in very specific details how to handle, but it gives us all of the principles that we need to address the issues of the culture today and to address just going through life. And I think that's one of the things that we have to get back to. That's one of the things that the early pastors did. That's what the Black Robe Regiment did. They were teaching their congregations about a biblical worldview. Why was it important that individual property rights that we find in the Bible? Why is it important that individual is their conscience is held before God and nobody else, not the state, not anybody else first. It's held before God. Those principles are what guided those early settlers in early country to come up with this great nation. But they also guided the church, this nation, to be one of the beacons of hope for the whole world and one of the beacons of sending the gospel to the whole world.
Troy, you just mentioned the term biblical worldview. What happens when Christian pastors lack having a biblical worldview? What does it do to the church?
Well, okay, let's first of all, it does several things to the church, and then I'll talk about what it even extends on to society. When pastors don't have a biblical worldview, it's almost like to say that that outside of the church there's this kind of neutrality, right? We sort of think that there's this neutrality outside of the church. But back to your whole point on schools, you know, when Christian schools across this country and even the public school system, they were really founded by Christians. That was started by Christians with the idea that education was important, but biblical education was important. You know, Thomas Jefferson, this so-called separation of church and state author, was the head of the Washington school district school board. And as this guy who supposedly wanted separation of church and state made sure the school board mandated that two things were taught: the Bible, okay, the Christian Bible, and what was called Watt's Hymnal. And Watt's Hymnal was kind of a commentary on the Bible, not just a hymn book. It was a commentary on the Bible, because that was important, because somebody's worldview is going to prevail. There is no neutrality out there. There's no such thing as a neutral worldview. And when pastors don't help teach that worldview and help shape the worldview of their congregations, when they're not shepherding, and this I believe is a shepherd responsibility and accountability, we're not shepherding their congregations of that worldview, somebody's worldview is going to slip in, and somebody's worldview is going to take hold. And in today's world, where we have just a massive amount of distractions out there, the amount of time we spend on social media or just mainstream media or listening to other things, somebody's worldview is going to come in. And so really shepherds have to look at this as not only them helping disciple their flocks, but protecting them as well. We have to protect protect them from these very, opposite antithetical worldviews that are in conflict with a Christian worldview.
That's so good. You know, from your watchtower, we'll just call it a watchtower, are you seeing that legacy media and large platforms, are they becoming more friendly and open to the biblical worldview that you espouse and that I espouse as well? Or are they shunning opportunities for people like us to engage?
No, unfortunately, it's the latter. The legacy ministry or legacy media that's out there is kind of written off Christianity. Matter of fact, I'll tell you, one of the things I talk about a lot is back to your worldview. One of the things we have clearly seen today, there was a time when I would call there was a lot more nonpartisanship in politics, and there was a lot of issues that were cross-aisle issues, that both sides work on when it came to the importance of family, the importance of faith, the importance of individual responsibility. All of those things were there. But today we're so polarized in our worldviews. There really is the Judeo-Christian worldview that holds dear faith, that holds that there is a creator, that holds family as the number one institute that's out there. Again, holds this idea of personal responsibility, all of those values and morals and ethics that we really get that make society solid and grow them on that side. On the other side, you now have the liberalism, what we call classical liberalism, is really gone. And you now have this progressive left here that has moved into socialism and even deeper now into communism, which is nothing more than a socialism from a dictatorial kind of agenda here. But at the base of that, the first of all, is no belief in God. God is not, man is the highest authority, not God. The family and the morality of what we find in Christianity is the problem in society, not the solution. And so all of the sexual confusion we have today, all the breakdowns of the family we have today, the lack of the sanctity of life today, all comes out of this godless worldview. And then, of course, they've now found that there's this wall. 37% of our country still holds what we call a very solid biblical worldview. Unfortunately, we need more, but they have enough that get out to influence the governance of this country. But the left sees that is the biggest threat. So legacy media spends a lot of its time attacking Christianity, or what I say is ignoring it. And let me give you an example of that. Christian persecution is at an all-time high around the globe. There are the most dangerous faith, according to Voice of the Martyrs, and even the United Nations' own report, the most dangerous faith to hold in the world is Christianity. There are more Christians murdered around the world than any other faith that's there. You would not find this reported in the mainstream media anywhere. You barely find it even touched by them. If it wasn't for the fact that Christian media and other organizations would report this, you would almost think it didn't even happen around the world. 1,100 incidents in Europe last year of arson of churches. 1,100 of that. And so, again, ignored by Christian media. So we live in a world where most of the world, especially that holds this left, progressive, godless worldview, they are hostile to Christianity and the Christian communicators.
Troy, I want to take that statement a little bit further, of them being hostile towards Christian communicators, and say something that you probably wouldn't say, but I'll just take the bait and say it. They're even more so hostile towards white, straight Christian men. That has become the prototype of hatred in America, to pillory, to bludgeon, and to target the patriarchy who espouses to be, white, straight Christian men.
Yeah, I would say that they are at the center of the target for sure. That's the bullseye. But moving out from that bullseye, again, it's anybody that holds the Christian faith that's in that, or you're going to be somewhere in those concentric circles, of targeting by the left. And the problem with that is, I think, is sometimes if you don't think you're the bullseye, you don't think you're ever going to be the target. But when the bullseye's gone, somebody else is going to move in.
It's true.
But yeah, that is. And you know what? I can talk about that a little bit because that's why we're seeing some things in the younger white generation, Christian generation, that are embracing some of these very far right kinds of things, because it's a reaction to that kind of being disenfranchised and villainized by society today.
And the Bible says that there's nothing new under the sun. And so Satan has a way of repeating his strategy. He has a great deal of intel, but he repeats the strategies, and we see it taking place today. We see it in education. We saw it with critical race theory and all of the racial consciousness talk. The first time that I went to a school board meeting and spoke, it was to defend a young Caucasian girl who was being demonized for her Christian faith. Her teacher told her that believing in Jesus was tantamount to believing in a brick wall. But only for me to go to the school board district and gain more information about what's going on there. Yes, there's anti-Christian bigotry taking place, but also all of the racial consciousness talk that was taking place in 2021 and in 2022 that was rather divisive. And it was intentional. It was smack dab in your face. It was men like Ibram Kendi who believed that the best way to deal with past racism is present racism. And so that's where we castigate white people and demonize white people and say that their racism is irreversible, even if they repent of it, because they are white. We see that taking place today, and it's strategically applied to the media, legacy media, commentators. We see that the SPLC has been working in that as well. And so there are many strategies that the enemy is using in these last days to throw us off. And these are some things that we have to talk about, not just from a podcast, but from the pulpit. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree 100%. Again, a shepherd's role is to guide their flock and to help their flock navigate. I'm a Nebraska farm boy. I know what it's like to work on a farm and to work with animals there. And I don't think the Bible's illustration or analogy here is too far from it. We need guidance as people. We're very easily swayed. As we saw, we sometimes have this, as Allie Beth Stuckey calls it, toxic empathy. And then we have this hyper grace that puts in. But we need shepherds to speak up on these issues and the issues of the day, because our people are asking for it, looking for guidance. And if we don't speak up on it today, we have to, again, I want to go back to this. There is no neutrality out there. There is no such thing as, this idea of the Vulcans, without any feelings if you're a Star Trek fan or whatever. There's something is going to fill the vacuum out there. And if they're not hearing what the biblical view is, what the Bible says about these topics, then they're going to listen to all of the rhetoric coming out of as you said, the propaganda of the mainstream media, because the mainstream media has bought into all of these ideas, because that's where they are. That's where the commentators are. That's where the producers are. That's where the executives are in the mainstream media. They believe in these ideas and they're parroting them all over the board, and they're going to bombard your congregations with them. So yeah, I'm happy that you podcasters and Christian communicators are out there addressing these issues. But pastors need to address it weekly with their congregations because they have the most influence.
But what happens when a shepherd becomes afraid of sheep? You know, and we see this in the church, Troy. I mean, it's not foreign, and I don't get it. You know, I don't understand how a shepherd who's called, you know, to be a man after God's own heart, called to lead and to guide and to feed the flock, to teach the whole counsel of the word of God, to preach the word of God, line upon line and precept upon precept. Then we see these shepherds, they tiptoe around the sheep because they are afraid that the sheep, I guess, might bah or something. I don't know.
Trample them. No, you're afraid when you're, you know, again, on the farm, when if you get afraid of that you really can't lead them because you're going to be in fear that your flock is going to trample you, you know, and it really goes back to the biblical principle. Who do we fear? Do we fear God or do we fear man? You know, I think of Jesus when he was, you know, after the triumphant entry into the city, and he was teaching in John chapter 12, and he was talking to the disciples, and he just gave the clearest indication that he is the Christ, and that he's about to go to the cross. And in 12:46, it says that the Jew and many of those who were in authority believed, but would not confess, because they were afraid of being thrown out of the synagogue. They were afraid of what man was going to think of them rather than what God was going to think of them. And as we know, the Bible also tells us in James, right, many of you should not become leaders because you will be held to a higher standard, a higher judgment by God in there. And again, this kind of goes back to, let me talk about this a little bit. It goes back to this mentality that we've had in the pulpit that came out of this program-driven movement into the church, and the seeker-driven movement, which really dumbed down everything in the church to the lowest denominator, a non-believer, where the church was always supposed to be about building up and making the bride of Christ beautiful, the believers, and the non-believers got convicted over that. But because of that, we have what I call today too many of the CEO pastors. Too many pastors who think like a CEO and look at their congregations like they're consumers, and they're afraid that they're going to upset their consumers and maybe upset their revenue model, or maybe not be the most popular with their people. But look, history tells us in the church, some of the greatest church leaders that we've had were extremely unpopular during their time and persecuted during their time, but they stood up for what was right, and they stood up for God because the culture demanded it. The culture needed it. The culture needed that light on the hill. It needed the salt to make it and preserve it.
You know, when I think about the phrase that you came up with, the CEO pastors, it makes me think of just franchises, you know, and how everyone is concerned about protecting a brand, be it Walmart, be it Target, be it, I don't know, Sheets, be it whatever, you name it. But the same thing for the church, you know, when a church or a CEO pastor builds a multi-site church, you know, it becomes a franchise model. And so he becomes a CEO pastor, and he wants to, you know, make sure he fills every church and every location. Say he has 5, 10, or 15 or 20 locations. Naturally, the pastor will become the CEO pastor. But there's some danger within that as well, right, Troy?
Oh, there's a lot of danger in that when you're a pastor, because having come from the business world and the pastorate world are two. These are not the same thing, not the same equation.
They're not. Are you sure they're not the same?
I'm pretty sure. I've been in both. I'm pretty sure about this because in the consumer-driven world, yes, you know, what are you concerned with? You're concerned with what the consumer thinks. You're concerned with the trends that the consumer are going to. And if you see a certain trend, I'll give you an example. Many pastors today won't address all of the sexuality issues that we're having in the culture today because they feel like the younger generation has already bought into this. They're already bought into this. And if I address it, I'm going to alienate those people, and they're going to leave to my church and they're going to go to XYZ church across the city here who doesn't address those issues. So I need to stay away from that. But that's not what we're called. Pastors are called to teach the full counsel of God and to bring truth and light into their congregations and to disciple. I mean, we're called as pastors and leaders. I say it this way. Our job is in sanctifying God's church to get ready for that wedding day. Any of us who are fathers, I have 2 daughters. I had one that got married a year ago. Any of us that understand that, you want the bride to be the most beautiful she can be for that day and the most prepared she can be for that day. And as Christian leaders and pastors, our role is to make sure that the bride of Christ is as beautiful as she can be for that wedding day and as ready for that wedding day. And for that to mean as sanctified as she can be for that day. And we're worried and we are more concerned about the groom and what the groom thinks of us than we should be about what society thinks for us. We're not throwing a big party. We're getting ready for the most beautiful wedding that is ever going to take place.
You just talked about sanctification, which is a term. It's a word that in the kingdom has become derogatory. No one wants to talk about sanctification. You know, earlier you talked about discipleship. No one wants to talk about discipleship. That means you have to smell like sheep. Someone has to really roll up their sleeves and do some dirty work here. But with these terms, discipleship and sanctification, here's another one, holiness. Holiness.
Right.
Be ye holy, for I am holy. The seraphims were flying around in Isaiah 6 singing what? Holy, holy, holy. Lord God Almighty, the whole earth is filled with your glory. I mean, the holiness of God should stop us dead in our tracks daily. From the moment we wake up, when we have new mercies, a new opportunity to dot our I's and cross our T's, to live on mission and assignment, to be image bearers made in the Imago Dei. These things should be at the forefront of our mind and upon the table of our hearts daily. But people don't want to talk about these terms, Troy. I mean, holiness is something that many people have moved far away from. And I think it's part of the reason why you're seeing the rise of the CEO pastor, the church that's given towards easy believism, the church that's given towards hyper grace, the church that, you know, during the BLM era in 2020 that became more race driven, you know, than truth driven. You see all of that because holiness has become an issue that we don't want to discuss.
You're exactly right. It's an issue we want to avoid in there, because if we discuss it, then we have to address it and address it not only in with our congregation, but address it in our own personal lives. When we talk about this, all of those issues, discipleship, sanctification, holiness, but they go back to again, I'm going to go back to one thing, and that's our focus is on God. And ultimately we think of our accountability to God, both as a pastor, Christian communicator, or just an individual Christian. If our focus is on God and our accountability is to God, that changes or should change our behavior. If Christianity just isn't this insurance card that we pull out of our pocket in a time of crisis, crisis, or something in our the Bible's in our house behind a glass case that says break in case of emergency. If it's something that we actually live out each and every day, then we are going to be moving to be holier every day like God. John Bunyan, one of my favorite folks in history, not just because of the Pilgrim's Progress that he wrote. He wrote another book called the Institutes of the Ignorant, which at the time was just meant answers for the common man. It's kind of a Q&A book that's there. And somebody asked him the question, does sin in my life mean that I'm not saved? And you know how he answered that? He said, no. He said, sin in your life for the Christian is an indication of your salvation because the sinner cares not for his sin. He said the Christian should care about it. It should bother you as a Christian. It should upset you as a Christian. It should bring you to a reckoning and repentance. That's what the indication in our life. That's what holiness is about. That's why a lot of the church fathers, the older they got and the more mature they got in the faith, the more filthy they saw themselves as in their lives, because they were concerned about their view before God and the holiness before God, because they loved God and they feared God in a proper love and a proper fear.
The Bible talks about let him that think he standeth take heed lest he falls, right? Which keeps you from overconfident living. We practically daily have to assess ourselves. We have to. You're leading a large organization with some of the most powerful and influential voices the world has to offer. The work is arduous. It's tedious. Daily we see the flesh creeping up and rising up. And do I answer this biblically, or do I answer this based upon what John thinks? And sometimes we see the personality or the ingenuity of ourselves creep into how we may say things and may address things. But I do think that this conversation around discipleship, sanctification, and holiness is what sets us apart. It gives us an edge. When the church doesn't want to discuss these topics, we oftentimes fall into churches that don't talk about hell, and who only focus on heaven, if we talk about that at all, because today really the focus is not heaven or hell. It's, living our best life now and being rich now and having everything today and being blessed now and 10 steps to become this, that, and the third. But yet and still, we're under the judgment of the verse that says, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you.
Right. That's a verse that should shake us all to the core, because these were people who believed they were believers. They believed they were followers. That's the really frightening part about that verse was that they thought they were followers, but they didn't. They had none of it in action. None of it. They didn't carry it out. It was just nothing more than a thought in their head, or as they said in John, that there were many who believed but would not confess, which means would not live out. Because if you don't confess it, you're not living it out.
That's right.
in your lives. But yeah, we have replaced, again, there was a switch around the middle of the 20th century, around the mid-1900s, this mentality switch when we took prayer out of schools,
yes,
when we took the 10 Commandments out of schools, when we capitulated to evolution as a source for the creation of man and humanity, and of course a lot of society lost its moral compass, its ethical compass, and its purpose as well. Because if evolution is the way of the day, you have no purpose in life then there. And us as both church leaders and as church members, we have to realize that that we're grounded on the foundation of our Christian worldview. And that should be the glasses and the lens that we look forward, we look at life to. And that should be the lens, as Jesus said. I love John, the Gospel of John, especially those chapters 13 through 15 or 13 through 18, where he's in that upper room. We know he challenged the disciples with what how do you sum up the Bible? Of course, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. In John, he says, a new commandment I give you. You've heard it said that you should love your neighbor as yourself. I want you to love your neighbor as I have loved you.
Woo. That's expensive. That's expensive, Troy. That's going to cost. That's going to cost us something.
That's right. That's going to cost us to carry our cross, our burdens, and to be selfless, and to not worry about what the world thinks of us, but to worry about whether we are about our Father's work.
Troy, that's a mic drop statement there. We're now seeing people turn to artificial intelligence with questions they once might have brought to a pastor. They go to AI, they go to Claude, they go to ChatGPT, Gemini. Why are Christians asking AI about faith, morality, and scripture instead of going to their churches?
Well, let me give you a scary statistic that we just got with our good friends at Back to the Bible, who do a lot of polling. Not only are they asking about, I think it was about 18% or so were going to AI to get these faith questions, but about 9% of them said that they would trust AI over their pastor right now. And we're just at the infancy of AI out there. And you have to, again, you wonder, are they afraid to ask these same questions to their pastors because they're not going to get the answers from their pastor, or their pastor's going to give the soft answer? Or are they asking them because their pastors never addressed these questions, never brought them up, never put that? That's a good question that I think we'll add to our next survey, as why are you going to AI versus your pastor? But usually when people do that, there's a vacuum in there. Again, they're trying to fill the vacuum. There's a place they couldn't fill. They could get the answer or not the answer. But I'm pretty concerned about that 9% that would believe AI over their pastor, especially. So my deep background is in technology and IT, and there is no, and AI is, again, AI is not, artificial intelligence is not neutral. Behind it are two things: human programming in it, and on all the information it relies on was information created by humanity. And this is why we've seen humanity in the broad sense of humanity, not just Christians, but all of humanity. We know all of humanity is broken. Humanity is sinful, and humanity has all of these problems. It's why some AI models have found that they're racist or they're biased or it's not even that they were programmed against Christianity. It's just the very bulk of humanity was against Christianity, and so they're biased against it.
Troy, that is so good. I look forward to hearing more about this and researching. The name of that group that you cited that provides this information is what again? The Bible.
For which group?
Back to the Bible.
Oh, Back to the Bible.
Yes.
Back to the Bible. But you can go to nrb.org.
Okay.
We presented those findings at the last NRB convention, and you can go and just do the search on that. It was the State of Christianity survey. Okay. There's a lot of good information in there, and all of this work that we do and a lot of stuff that we talk about, you can find the information on these topics and more at nrb.org.
Final two questions. What is the greatest threat facing Christian communicators right now? Censorship, technological disruption, financial pressure, cultural hostility, or Christians simply being unwilling to speak boldly?
Let's say the church has always had hostility. Jesus told us that would be the way we would face. If the world hates you, don't forget it hated me first. And so if it hated Christ, it's going to hate Christ's followers and Christ's bride. And so we've always had hostility. The church has always had technology challenges out there that we've had. I think the biggest problem facing the church is the church itself. And I don't think it's censorship or bigotry or bias from the outside. It is self-censorship from the inside. It's our unwillingness to really live up to and to be shepherds and to be leaders and to be teachers, to be the gifts that God told us that he was giving the church. He was giving the church those who would. And that's what I think our biggest challenge. I often say the church is in America, we have a lot of organizations are called 501c3s in there. That's the tax code. And the C, and unfortunately, the C stands for too much. It stands for cowardice. We need to make the C stand for courage.
I love it.
The biggest thing the church needs and the world needs is courageous Christian leaders and pastors.
Last question. Free speech and religious liberty were once principles with broad bipartisan support. Okay. We're not there right now. But do you believe those protections are becoming more fragile, particularly for Christians whose beliefs conflict with modern progressive orthodoxy?
Absolutely. Not only more fragile, they are completely under attack by the left. None of us would have ever thought we'd live in a time where there would be a political party in our country that would actually talk about the need to eliminate the First Amendment, to eliminate it, to take it away. And look around the world. America, the founding fathers, again, came up with the Bill of Rights, and particularly the First Amendment was based on this idea of the individual conscience, the freedom of religion, the free exercise thereof, the freedom of the press, the freedom to petition the government, all of these freedoms that were put together, the freedom of speech, the right to say what we want to say. All of these were put together based on their biblical principles of understanding that our rights came from God. The far left today doesn't believe in God. They want to replace God with the state. And that's what I think we have to understand what's under attack today in our individual freedoms, because when the state takes those away, just look around the world where this has happened, and following it is nothing but hurt and death and pain and suffering.
Troy, to use football vernacular, if it was 4th and 1 on the goal line, fourth quarter as well, I'm pulling you in. You're gonna fight right beside me, because you are made for the trenches, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on Disturbing the Peace. Let us know how we can follow you and support you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. First of all, it's always great to be with you. It's always great to be with. I'm a Navy guy. You guys, I look at you guys as all in the front lines. I'm back there rooting, getting you moving. But you can follow all that we do on nrb.org. You can also follow us on social media, particularly on X at NRB. Just search us. There's NRB CEO and NRB Association and NRB Convention. All of our handles are out there, and follow what we're doing. And if you'd love to support us, first of all, pray for us, strength and wisdom, and keep us, as you said, on the good path, on the right path. And then there are ways to support us if you go to nrb.org.
Troy, thank you so much for coming on Disturbing the Peace. God bless you, my friend. Well, my friends, I pray that you were blessed by this episode with the legendary Troy Miller. I meant what I said. This guy is stout. We need more leaders who are training up the voices that are communicating our precious faith nationally, locally, and globally. And that's the work that Troy is doing through NRB. Do me a big favor, like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Set your notifications so you know when I am going live. Go to Apple Podcast and go to Spotify and give me a 5-star review. And then let us know in the comment section below. Let me know, am I right or am I wrong? Am I weak or am I strong? Let me know if you agree or disagree with what we stated in this interview. God bless you and God bless America. Take care.